Welcome back to Star Wars Shovelware, my name's Luke, and today on the channel I'm bringing you a gameplay overview of Hyper Echelon on the Nintendo Switch, a vertical scrolling shoot 'em up inspired by the classic arcade games, in which you travel the galaxy as a duo of hotshot pilots on a mission to save the day and repel a malicious alien threat. Now, I'm not going to be rating the game in this review for reasons I'll go into shortly, but I'll be providing more than enough information for you to make a decision on whether or not the game is for you. So hit that like button, drop a sub if you enjoy my content and want to see more, and let's get into it. So the story in Hyper Echelon isn't exactly something you'd call unique, and it pretty much falls in line with almost any shmup from the 90s, with you playing as a pair of elite pilots on a mission to save the universe from an invading alien force. In comparison to some games though, the story is a lot more involved with this one, and prior to beginning a level, you usually get a cutscene and a bit of dialogue to read through, as the two main characters discuss mission progress and the next moves. The characters in the game are pretty cliche, with one being a cocky, smart-mouthed hotshot who's the son of a legendary pilot, and the other being the straight-laced professional type, and I really enjoyed the interactions between the two of them and between the other characters in the game that you meet, with there being some pretty amusing lines of dialogue. While I've only played for around half of the story, it's actually not bad stuff. It kept me intrigued enough to have me not skip my way through the cutscenes, and I felt it was well integrated into the gameplay. So when it comes to the gameplay, Hyper Echelon plays more like a classic vertical shooter rather than a bullet hell shooter, and upon first starting the game you're introduced to its controls and mechanics, which do have a little bit more going on than other shmups I've played, but are still relatively simple. Now, you control your ship with the left thumbstick or D-pad and pop off shots with the B button. Your health is displayed in the top left corner, which can be a bit of a pain to keep an eye on when things get hectic, and next to it you have your energy levels, with which you're able to cast one of 3 abilities indicated by the icons below them. These include a large explosive blast which damages enemies, a time slowing ability, and finally a damage shield which can be manually activated or procs automatically when your HP reaches critical levels. Activating an ability consumes 1 bar of energy, and you're able to top them up by grabbing energy tanks or absorbing it from these fat bug creatures, but the issue here is that abilities have charges too, and you only start with a single charge, so you can't activate them multiple times per level, and you'll usually try to retain them for the bosses. Now, once you get through the tutorial and into the main game, you're presented with a galaxy screen from which to select a level you want to play, and Hyper Echelon does things a little differently when it comes to progression. Instead of just having a linear set of levels that you work your way through, each level comes with 4 different objectives, which, in addition to the one which requires you to kill the boss, include things like killing specific enemies, collecting every energy pickup, or rescuing harmless creatures, and unlocking new levels requires you to obtain a specific number of medals from these objectives. This in itself isn't a huge issue, as collecting all 4 medals on a level unlocks the next difficulty for it, which also includes another 4 medals, but it does mean replaying levels in order to get them all. Levels themselves though are all quite varied. You'll be travelling to different planets, through asteroid belts and through hyperspace, and each level presents its own unique enemies for you to contend with, as well as a few unique environmental hazards, and I appreciated the effort that had been put in here to keep things interesting. Completing levels generally requires you to fight your way through them, killing enemies and snagging the odd pickup to improve your movement or attack speed or heal you up, and while there are occasional breaks in levels which feature unique events, your main goal is to get to the end and take down the boss there to complete the level. The bosses though are also pretty well done. Each has its own unique attack pattern for you to learn, which usually changes once the boss hits around half health, and they usually have multiple body parts for you to destroy. Like the rest of the game though, bosses are pretty challenging, and while your biggest struggle will probably lie in actually getting to them with a decent amount of health remaining, you'll likely need multiple attempts to learn how best to tackle the bosses. Now overall I found gameplay within levels to be pretty enjoyable, at least to start with. Like I said, it's a surprisingly tough little shmup, this one, with part of its difficulty stemming from the developer's very intentional positioning of enemies and programming of enemy movement patterns, and I won't deny that its difficulty did have me frustrated on more than one occasion, but I can deal with difficult games where perseverance is key to completing levels. The issue with Hyper Echelon though is that it's not just a case of replaying a level over and over until you eventually crack it, and this is the primary reason that I haven't yet completed the game, and to be honest probably never will. Now, the game has an upgrade system in which you're able to improve your ship by collecting gold parts within missions and then heading to the mothership to do a spot of maintenance. These upgrades include weapon upgrades, increasing both the damage of your primary weapon as well as granting additional projectiles and a secondary laser weapon, and you also have drones which revolve around your ship, defending it from enemy projectiles or homing on enemy ships and smash into them. There are health upgrades and ones which increase your number of charges to your special abilities, and finally an antenna upgrade which has a random chance of summoning a powerful NPC ally for a short duration. Now, each of these upgrades has 5 tiers of 10 points, so 50 points in total, and the cost to upgrade increases with each point. But the improvements that just a few points have are barely noticeable, and with each new level comes more powerful enemies with increased health and damage, meaning that these upgrades are necessary to progress and skill alone won't get you through them. In addition to your own ship, you do get a wingman who flies alongside you and is able to attack, soak up a bit of damage and has their own unique abilities you can activate, but in order to have any real chance of getting through levels, you're gonna have to go back and grind previous levels over and over to earn gold for upgrades, and I personally just didn't find this very enjoyable, as it's not like the levels are randomly generated, so it just gets very repetitive very quickly. Now, I managed to make it about halfway through the game before I got fed up and decided to call it a day. But in addition to the main campaign mode, you do have a survival mode, which sees you trying to earn top spot on the global leaderboards, and this one features procedurally generated levels and 6 different simulations containing a variety of enemies from the campaign mode. There's also a boss rush mode which allows you to fight any of the game's bosses once you've encountered them in the campaign, and after selecting your first boss you'll then be tasked with defeating all of them one after another in as fast a time as possible. Overall though, Hyper Echelon is not a bad game by any means. It's really well put together and has some interesting mechanics, but it's also very challenging, and I didn't enjoy having to play the same levels over and over just to progress to the next level, where I then once more find myself underpowered again and have to repeat the process all over again. There is a decent amount of content in the game though, and it has a good amount of replayability with its survival mode. But I'd say that if you don't enjoy repetition or are just looking for a shmup whose levels you can play through from start to finish in one sitting, then Hyper Echelon isn't going to be the game for you. So visually then, I personally thought that Hyper Echelon looked great. It has that retro appeal to it and a kind of cartoony aesthetic to its sprites and environments, but there's also plenty of detail, and I really like the visual style of this one. The game's audio is also really well done. We get some nice sound effects with plenty of punch to them, and the game's soundtrack is excellent with some great retro sounding tunes to blast along to. All in all, some good stuff when it comes to the audio and visuals in this one. So performance wise, I didn't have any frame rate issues whilst playing, even when things got hectic on screen, and the game runs really well in both handheld and docked mode. Issues wise, I've already mentioned most of my problems with the game, but in addition to these, in some of the levels some enemy projectiles become very difficult to see due to them being nearly the same colour as the background, and I ended up taking a lot of hits that I didn't even see coming. Another feature which I personally felt could have been left out of the game, or at least on easier difficulties, are the infected enemies, which are immune to any sort of damage and just really ended up pissing me off more than anything else. When all's said and done though, the game plays really well and there's some great ideas going on, but the repetitive nature of the gameplay just wasn't my cup of tea, and after about 4 or 5 hours worth of playing, unfortunately I'd had my fill with the game. There are, however, plenty of people who will enjoy this one, and so don't let my own opinions of the game deter you from giving it a go, as you may play it and find it more to your liking. And so that about does it for this gameplay overview of Hyper Echelon on the Nintendo Switch. Hopefully I was able to give you a good idea of what to expect from this one, and so if it helped you out, show your appreciation by hitting that like button, and if you're looking for more Switch reviews and content, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. For now though, I just want to thank you all once again for watching, and until next time, take care of yourselves, and game on.